The Seahawks announced their initial 53-man roster yesterday, but that's already getting ripped to shreds. We're going to be diving into the early roster shuffling by John Schneider and company with 2 new additions, plus the 17-man practice squad, all coming up here on a jam-packed Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening nearby Auburn, Washington, or down in Corpus Christi, Texas. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks just announced their initial 53-man roster yesterday, but as we warn every year, don't get too comfortable with that 53-man roster. We've got a couple of new additions we're going to be diving into, and we'll be looking at the practice squad later in the show, plus a Wednesday mailbag to answer questions from you, the valued 12s. This episode brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's only been 24 hours since the Seahawks announced their initial 53-man roster, but if you were getting ready to put that roster on a plaque, you probably should have waited a little bit while, because they're already changing things at the bottom of the roster, and there's more changes surely to come here in the next few days. The most notable move coming in the form of plucking a defensive back off the waiver wire from a division rival, a familiar name, Derion Kendrick, who played for the Rams the last 3 years, former 6th-round pick out of Georgia, claimed off waivers by the Seahawks. And in a corresponding move, John Schneider did say he expects this player to be back. I'm assuming that will be on the practice squad. But Shaquille Griffin is the one that was released today to open up a spot for Derion Kendrick. And I will admit, Rob, this move, I don't normally question waiver claims that much because it's just claiming somebody that was cut by someone else. But this move perplexes me a little bit, to be honest with you, because I know that they're familiar with Derion Kendrick. His only career interception came against Geno Smith a couple years ago. So I know that they've seen him play some of his best football against them. And he came from a 2-time national champion at the college level. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why the Seahawks maybe would be enamored, and yet the guy has played almost all of his snaps to the boundary corner, has not played much in the slot, minimal special teams experience, ran a 4.79 coming out of Georgia, and he's had a laundry list of character concerns dating back to high school. It just didn't strike me necessarily as a Seahawky kind of move, and yet John Schneider said he loved the competitor and they were excited to add him. So we'll see what happens. He is a younger player than Shaquille Griffin, but this was a move that I was kind of puzzled, to be honest.
Well, he did play a little bit of the slot cornerback position this past year during training camp as well as during the preseason, and sticky coverage. That's what I saw on tape. That's what I saw in going to the Los Angeles Rams training camp. This is a player that, as you said, I mean, he had I think he said 1 career interception. That was against the Seahawks. He is not a guy that has as many finish plays as I would like. And at the same time, that's probably why he was released at this point. But at the same time, again, sticky coverage. And this is a guy that is physical. He will jam receivers at the line of scrimmage and kind of disrupt their release. He is often right in their hip pocket as the ball comes in. He can come off is playing the nickel spot. He can come off and play in run support as well. He's got a kind of a knack for eluding would-be blockers and being able, if not make the tackle himself, at least be able to slow down the ball carrier to allow the cavalry to arrive. Frankly, Corbin, I think that this was just a really good football player, a starting caliber cornerback, as he proved when he was that 6th-round selection by the Los Angeles Rams. He dropped down, similar to Jared Ivey. We talked about before. Why did Jared Ivey wind up going undrafted as a defensive lineman? The Seahawks found an undrafted free agency, of course, and then wound up making the team outright. Why why do players like that fall? As you just talked about with Derion Kendrick and a very slow 40-yard dash time. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why he fell to the point that he did, because he was a good football player, Clemson and Georgia, where, as you referenced, he won back-to-back national championships. Again, it's a good player. He's got some, at least had character concerns in the past, and then had the slow 40-yard dash time. But when you watch him on tape, again, this is a player that a lot of NFL teams should probably have been jumping on board. And I think that the Seahawks just recognized that this is a guy that they had seen up close and personal, and just kind of took advantage of the fact that he was available. It reminds me a lot of what we saw a couple of years ago with the Seahawks stealing Drake Thomas, the linebacker from the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that the Seahawks got a steal here in getting Derion Kendrick, a cornerback who isn't going to push for starting minutes, because the Seahawks starting corners are really, really good. But at the same time, I think absolutely upgrades the quarterback position, especially because you believe that Shaq Griffin is going to be able to come back, whether it be on the practice squad or however else the Seahawks are able to get him back. Now they have not 6, but 7 quality corners. They are now one of the deeper cornerback groups in all of the league.
And the NFC West pouncing was not limited to the LA Rams as well. The 49ers and the Seahawks, as they like to do, they each took a player off the other team's release list. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, guess what, Seattle? You get to face him in week 1 now. The 49ers, who have a lot of injuries at wide receiver, signed Valdes-Scantling. As for the Seahawks, this was the move that I was a little bit more intrigued by. And look, Chazz Surratt has not lived up to what I thought he was going to be in the NFL. I loved his tape at North Carolina, and what a story this guy is. He was a quarterback at North Carolina, and then at the end of his college career moved over to linebacker. And one of the issues that he's really had is how light that he has been, especially in the lower body, not built to be able to handle the rigors of playing off-ball linebacker. Even in today's NFL, where we're seeing lighter guys playing that position, he was not physically ready for that, especially with the limited experience that he had there. So he washed out pretty quickly in Minnesota, didn't get a lot of snaps in New York, and then started quite a few games for Robert Saleh last year, which that kind of surprised me that Robert Saleh didn't keep him around, but that speaks to the linebacker talent that the 49ers have. But Surratt had a really good preseason for them, and he's still only 28 years old. I look at him, especially, he's looking at some pictures. He looks like a different guy now. He actually looks like an NFL linebacker physically. He has clearly hit the weight room. He's gotten a lot stronger. He only has 37 career tackles, and he's been in the league for 4 years. So that tells you all you need to know. He has not been a guy that's gotten a lot of opportunities, but he did some good things when the Jets played him last year. And the Seahawks, Mike Macdonald, if he claims a linebacker, I trust his judgment. He knows linebackers. If he was excited to go out and get Chazz Surratt, who they didn't claim off waivers, he was passed through waivers, and then they just signed him to the 53. That deal is expected to happen tomorrow. He is not on the roster yet, but he's expected to be signed tomorrow, which means Seattle will have to make another cut to open up room for him. But they only had 3 off-ball linebackers, and I'm intrigued by this move, adding Surratt, because one thing he has always been good at, Rob, blitzing the quarterback. He has always been really good at that. We know how much Mike Macdonald values that from his off-ball linebackers. He can play special teams. Really athletic guy, very instinctive guy that he just had to learn to play the position a little bit better and, again, get stronger. I think this move could be an under-the-radar one that maybe fans are discounting a little bit.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. I think that Chazz Surratt, like you said, I also liked him on tape back at North Carolina. I'm always intrigued by players who are switching positions and then playing the inside linebacker spot, just because that is a position that I think that requires such great instincts that if you are suddenly switching to that role, the way that Patrick O'Connell did, the way that the Seahawks were asking Jamie Sheriff, who, we'll talk about more because he was one of the Seahawks that they re-signed back to the practice squad after being released. I just think that you have to give a player a little bit of grace to be able to do so. And, similar to how I always kind of would just give a little bit of grace again, to the, head coach and Pete Carroll and his expertise in the secondary when he wound up, hey, arguing that maybe the club should draft a former wide receiver and some guy named Richard Sherman, some guy named Tariq Woolen, and obviously those have turned out very well. Then I think that when Mike McDonald decides that you want to sign a linebacker, I just think that you have to just recognize the fact that that is his position in which he has excelled. And so Chazz Surratt is a player that I liked, that you like. Obviously, Mike McDonald and John Schneider like. And again, San Francisco 49ers were a club that I was, I went to their training camp and I saw Chazz Surratt. And I thought that this guy absolutely looked like an NFL starting caliber linebacker, not just on the 53, but actually a guy that could contribute. I'm stunned when you mention the fact that he only has, 27 tackles to this point in his career, because at least in the preseason, I saw a guy that could fill the hole. He is filled out now. He does have some girth in his lower body. That was one of the questions I had about him before. He does have enough speed and agility to be able to cover out into the flats and deeper range. And he does have a little bit of rush ability to him. So, as you said, Corbin, this is an underrated move. Both of these, Derion Kendrick and Chazz Surratt, I think are quality moves by the Seahawks, plucking good players from division rivals. You're stealing from an opponent and adding to your own roster. That's exactly what this time of year is all about.
When we come back, we haven't opened up the mailbag for a while, and I'm sure there's plenty to ask questions about. So we're going to have a Wednesday mailbag. We're going to have that coming up next year on our latest edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back, so fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Rob and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, as well as Nick, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is. Our Locked On League's been running through Yahoo for a while now, and there's plenty of reasons why. Easy setup, great mobile app, and the smack talk just hits different in the message boards. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo. Each week, the lowest scoring team gets eliminated. No second week for you until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. Or if you're more into the classics, you can play a little head-to-head private league or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s for tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. As we have been doing sporadically throughout the course of the offseason, when you have all these different dates, we like to do our mailbag on Monday. When the regular season gets here next week, we will get back to that. But we are opening up the mailbag here on Wednesday, and plenty of good questions from you, our valued listeners. So let's get to it here, Rob. Our first one coming from Tyler Perry on X. With Dalton Reisner signing with Cincinnati, that happened this afternoon, and Shaq Mason getting arrested. I don't know when that happened, but that is a news development. Who are the guys you think Seattle looks for to fill the void at backup guard? Reisner was still the one that I was looking at, Rob. I don't know that there's anybody else out there at this point that really intrigues me that much, unless you're looking at, say, a Shane Lemieux or somebody like that that has played in a similar offense to the one that the Seahawks are running with Clint Kubiak.
Yeah, I don't see a bunch of players available now that I think are an absolute fit for the club. I just think that what they already have on the field. We talked about this. I think that Bryce Cabeldue is a quality player. I think that Josh Jones and his versatility as a tackle guard, again, gives the Seahawks a lot of confidence that they have the system already in place. Gray Zabel is going to be your starter at left guard. Anthony Bradford's going to be your starter at right guard. And Jalen Sandell, of course, has shown the ability to play virtually everywhere along the offensive line. So I don't think that the Seahawks are kind of cutting at their fingertips too much, or their fingernails, I guess, as far as being concerned about, can we improve the interior of the offensive line? I often say the proof is in the pudding. The Seahawks are running the football regardless of who the opponent was so far. The pass protection has been significantly improved. I think that this is, more of a question the fans are concerned about, but I don't get the impression the Seahawks are concerned about the interior of their offensive line. Maybe they should be, but I don't think that they are.
Yeah, I think it's more about the depth. I think that the starters, you can understand why there's optimism, but you do have some questions when you throw a bunch of rookies, inexperienced players. I mean, maybe you'll have Christian Haynes back in the 4-week minimum, and he'll be back to be as a backup as well. So, Seattle's got some cards they can play that are on the bench. Certainly, I would expect John Schneider's probably still looking out there and seeing what's available, but it seems like with Reisner being gone now, there really isn't a fit or a guy that's going to come in that's going to be a clear upgrade over what they already have on the roster. So you move forward with what you have. DK Wookie 1 on X. Could you see the Seahawks bringing in Christian Wilkins for a visit or maybe a trade for someone like Mazi Smith? I think trading for Mazi Smith is much more likely than bringing in Christian Wilkins at this point. I just think there's too much repetitiveness there in terms of what Wilkins would give you. He is not a true nose tackle. I'm just not sure how many reps there are. To me, that's a position of 3 tech where the Seahawks, not that you can't have too many players there, you can always add talent there, but I just don't see a fit necessarily there. Now, if Seattle had an injury and Wilkins was still available, then absolutely you can look that avenue. But I think it's more likely that Seattle would try to make a trade for somebody like a Mazi Smith that maybe you could get for a late day 3 pick. That would seem more likely, though at this point, I don't know that Seattle's going to be making any more trades. We'll just have to wait and see. But it seems like John Schneider seems pretty happy with where the roster is at right now, a week and a half until their week 1 game against the San Francisco 49ers. Zeke on X, are you at all concerned about how the Seahawks don't really have any fast playmakers for returners? And this question also had the assumption that Torrey Horton's going to be playing a ton on offense. So wondering whether he actually is going to be the one returning kicks and punts most of the time. And I think that does create a valid question, Rob.
Well, I think it creates a valid question. At the same time, we saw a couple of years ago, the Seahawks had D. Williams as very much a return specialist, and obviously that didn't work out as well as the Seahawks had hoped. But and I'm kind of previewing what we're going to be talking about here in the next segment. The Seahawks plucked a return star from the Denver Broncos roster that I think might be able to play that kind of a role. He's got legitimate speed, as does Torrey Horton. And so I don't think that is quite as much of a concern for this club as fans might be expecting.
Our next question coming from Hawk Ninja on Blue Sky. No Seahawk players were taken during the waiver period, or none were claimed, is what he means. Is that a sign that depth is an issue with this team? I'm going to say that's not an issue because less than 2.5% of the players that were cut got claimed in the entire NFL this year. There just weren't very many players that were claimed off of waivers. And maybe the biggest surprise for me was that Damian Martinez got through because I thought there were a few running back needy teams. Houston didn't claim any, which really surprised me. I thought the Texans would be in the market for running back help, but Martinez snuck through. You were able to get Jacardia Wright to sneak through. Seattle didn't have any players plucked up, and I don't think in this case that it really is a testament to there not being talent on this roster or depth. I just think you look at the transaction list this year, usually it's in that 4 to 5% range. Teams just weren't claiming players near as much as they do. It was cut by 50% this year compared to normal season. So I don't think it speaks to the Seahawks as much as it seems like most teams were pretty happy with the rosters that they had coming out of training camp, or they were looking at trades or free agents to upgrade their roster. Adam Baska on X, why do you think Mike Jarrell was traded? It seemed to me that he had a great athletic profile, and both of you and the Seahawks, of course, saw something special in him, even though he was raw coming out of a Division II school. We didn't get a lot of chance to talk about this yesterday, Rob. We kind of skimmed over it, but it was a little bit surprising to me that Seattle made that move.
I think that Amari Kite was a player that the Seahawks are pretty excited about. Again, I don't want to, just steal all of our thunder for our next segment here. But Amari Kite was one of the players that the Seahawks brought back on the practice squad. I think that the Seattle feels really, really comfortable about Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas's health at this point. And I also think that Mike Jarrell, as athletic as he is, that's what I was gushing about. At the same time, when he got popped in the mouth, he got pushed back significantly, and that is a huge concern in the NFL. This isn't just this isn't basketball. This is football, and that's one of the areas in which he struggled. So I think that he would be a liability in terms of the running game, as much as you want to run the football, as the Seahawks clearly want to do. So I think that Seattle, again, he was a guy for him, and let's trade him and get what we can get for him. So I am excited about Mike Jarrell's upside. I didn't think that he was as powerful at the point of attack in year 2 as I was hoping that he would be. And if you watch the preseason tape, you'll see it yourself.
Our last question here coming from Tando on Blue Sky. Any other trade possibilities leading up to the start of the season? And if you could bet, what position would it be for? So I kind of already answered this a little bit in the first part. I don't know that I'm going to say I'd be surprised, because look, it's John Schneider. He's probably on the phone talking to trade right now with somebody. That's what he does. I can just picture John Schneider going home and his wife Tracy being like, John, can you please stop calling general managers? Like, that's probably what's going on right now. But look, I think at this stage, it's probably more likely that we're going to see Seattle not make any more trades than it is that they're going to swing another deal or two. I thought we might see 2 or 3 of them in that first 24 hours, because that's just what John Schneider does. He's done it in the past. They did make the one deal with Mike Jarrell. If I was going to bet, if I was going to put money on a position that Seattle would still be trading for, I would say nose tackle. That is still the position I would say that with, just because Quentin Bohanna and Brandon Peely are on your practice squad. They are not on your 53-man roster. That is clearly still a position that Seattle feels like, well, we could maybe find an upgrade there. So if they could get somebody like a Mozzie Smith, then yeah, I think John Schneider would absolutely have strong consideration for making that move. Maybe inside linebacker, but it feels like right now, with some of the moves they've made and some of the moves that are still being reported that they might be making, that it seems more likely they are going to go with the waiver claim or signing free agent route to fill that void than they are going to trading. To me, nose tackle seems like the most likely. And if you're hoping for Micah Parsons, look, you guys can keep sending me pictures of him in the Dallas airport. That's just going to continue to make me chuckle more than anything. But if that happens, look, I'm not going to be hosting the next 2 episodes of this show. You guys can blame me if I'm not on here talking about a Micah Parsons trade, or not even blame. You could thank me, I guess would be the right word. But we'll see what ends up happening. I'd be a little surprised if there's a trade at this point from the Seahawks. When we come back, the Seahawks have a 17-man practice squad. You could actually wonder if it's a 19-man. We'll explain why that's the case. We'll get into the groove here and look at who the Seahawks brought back, which of those players have the best chance to stick around, and who might be a very quick practice squad signing before a few other newcomers come in. We'll be breaking all that down coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I think my computer is frozen, ladies and gentlemen, so I had to cut this out. All right, now here we go. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like and what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You could also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. This episode is also brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready to kick things off with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on the Sunday night matchup, trying to figure out how you're going to win with your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks announced their 53-man roster, the initial one yesterday. 1 day later, very quickly assembled their first 17-man practice squad. It's supposed to be 16 players, but Seattle does have a international player program player on their roster in Federico Moranguez, the undrafted rookie center out of Florida Atlantic, and they added him to their practice squad. When you have the opportunity to have a 17th player, you take advantage of that. And I think Moranguez earned the opportunity for further development this preseason as well. Did some good things for the Seahawks as their number 3 center. Like the active roster, and there's a trickle-down effect here, Rob, when there are moves made like Derion Kendrick and Chazz Surratt getting signed to the roster, you have to open up 2 spots for those players, and that means 2 guys are going to get cut, and if they're coming from the 53, the Seahawks probably want those players on their practice squad, which means, guess what? We got to cut 2 practice squad players to put those 2 guys on the practice squad, assuming that they clear waivers. So this is really it's a revolving door, so to speak, with how the roster and the practice squad is constantly changing. It's a fluid situation. So when we go through this first initial 17-man practice squad, I can guarantee you at least 4 or 5 of these guys will not be on the practice squad by the time we get to Friday. That's just the way things work. And I expect Seattle's going to continue doing roster shuffling, and that is going to trickle down to the practice squad. With that being said, let's take a look at who is on the practice squad right now for the Seattle Seahawks. And I mean right now, like this second, it can change that rapidly. But looking on the offensive side of the ball, as I mentioned earlier in the mailbag, Damian Martinez cleared waivers. So the Seahawks were able to bring him back. They also brought back Jacardia Wright and Anthony Tyus III, who joined the team midway through training camp. So there's 3 running backs that are on this practice squad roster right now. Tyrone Broden, Ricky White III returning at the receiver position, and then Satawa Lamea, Amari Kite, and Federico Moranguez at the offensive line spots, returning for the Seahawks. When I look at this cluster of players, there's a lot of them we expected were going to be brought back. If Martinez cleared, we figured the Seahawks were going to be re-signing him in this capacity as your 4th running back. Jacardia Wright earned that opportunity. As you mentioned, Amari Kite, maybe the biggest reason Mike Jarrell is in Atlanta right now. The Seahawks like what they've seen from him. Moranguez doesn't count against your 16-man limit, and he deserves to be on this practice squad. Satawa Lamea is the one that, look, I get it. He's a younger player, the chance to try to get him right. But he had such a difficult preseason and training camp. So John Benton's got a lot of work in front of him to get this kid's confidence back. But I guess if you're going to be able to do that, the practice squad is the right place to do that.
I think so. And look, Seattle Lamea, I mean, he proved himself, obviously, as going up against quality competition a year ago as an NFL starter. So I think that the fact that Seattle was able to bring him back at a discount on the practice squad and continue that development, he was an incredibly versatile and durable player at the University of Utah, one of the NFL or one of college football's most consistent producers of quality offensive linemen. happen, I think that it warrants Seattle bringing him back on the practice squad, even though I think that this is a night and day difference in terms of talent, in terms of, certainly in terms of talent as far as the players, but also in terms of just the coaching staff as well. Again, with all due respect to the previous coaches in Seattle. But at the same time, I also think that it gives Seattle some wiggle room. As you mentioned, with the signing of Chazz Surratt and Derion Kendrick, then there's likely going to be some players that were on the initial 53 that are going to get sent through waivers, and Seattle's going to hope to bring them back to their practice squad. And so if that is the case, then perhaps a player like a Satawa Leomea, perhaps a player like a Anthony Tyus, as you mentioned, he is one of 3 running backs on the practice squad. That's pretty unique for any NFL team to have that number of players at one position on your practice squad. So I do think that those are some players that, while I do think are quality NFL players, at the same time, I don't know that they are going to be on Seattle's practice squad for very long.
Yeah, I think Tyus is the one there that naturally, and again, this is not taking shots at players. This is the way this works. Like, you have 16 slots, 17 in this case, and you release a guy after 53, you're going to have to make room. And I think keeping 3 running backs is probably a little bit rich for Seattle on that practice squad, even though Tyus has some kick return experience, and that's probably one of the reasons that they brought him back initially. That could be a case where he ends up being a Sir Roderick Thompson type where, well, if we have an injury, we'll keep you on speed dial and we'll call you up and see if you want to jump back in the practice squad. So Seattle's done that in the past, but they have less offensive guys than defensive guys on this practice squad. That would be the offensive player that I think probably would be the first one that they would move on from. And I guess we'll find out the answer to that tomorrow. As for the defensive side, a lot of beef. There's a lot of beef here. And part of it's because there's no beef on the active roster. So you got to have them somewhere. Quentin Bohanna, Brandon Peely, the 2 nose tackles that we thought were vying for one spot on the 53. They are both on the practice squad re-signing today. J.R. Singleton, the surging undrafted rookie, he's brought back, as is Anthony Campbell, another undrafted rookie defensive tackle. Jamie Sheriff and Patrick O'Connell at the off-ball linebacker positions. Jalen Gaines is the only edge rusher that was signed, not Tyreek Smith, by the way. And Shamar Jean-Charles coming back at the cornerback spot. And the Seahawks get Jarek Reed to return, which I know, talking to people in the building, that was one of the guys they were most excited about being able to bring back because he's a good player, just got washed out from a numbers game at a really deep position. So it feels like the defensive side of the football, there's a number of guys here that absolutely the Seahawks hope to hang on to, but it does create an interesting situation for a couple things. Shaquille Griffin now getting cut. John Schneider said he's staying in town, so that tells me they're hoping to get him on the practice squad, and they have room for another veteran on this practice squad. Does that mean Shamar Jean-Charles is done in Seattle? Does that mean they move on from one of their defensive tackles because they've got 4 of them on this roster? I'm fascinated to see what plays out there. And you've also got the report of Chris Paul Jr., also known as Pooh Paul, coming to the Rams, a draft pick. The Rams cut him, didn't bring him back. There have been reports surfacing that he has been signed by the Seahawks, but he was not on their practice squad today, as was Courtney Johnson, the speedy receiver returner from the Broncos that you mentioned, former Arkansas State standout, ran a 4.39. He is a fast son of a gun, really speedy. Those 2 players have been reported to join the Seahawks, but neither one of them was on the practice squad. So you're looking at a possibility tomorrow, Rob, of having as many as 4 of these guys that are on this practice squad no longer being on the practice squad because they got 2 outside signings, and they're going to have to get 2 players put onto this practice squad that are getting cut off the 53. I would think that is going to be their mission, including Shaquille Griffin.
Yeah, I want to be as respectful as possible. I'm in kind of a unique position here. I don't want to talk too much about players that are not currently on the Seahawks roster because, hell, they could be members of the BC Lions roster here at the snap of a finger as well. But Courtney, potentially from the Denver Broncos, was a guy that really intrigued me as a return guy. You mentioned the 4.38 or 4.39 speed. He's 5'11", he's 185 pounds. I watched him throughout the preseason. season. I just see a different level of agility and straight line speed than anybody that the Seahawks currently have on their roster, especially in terms of return guys. Look, Torrey Horton's an excellent return guy as well, but if he is going to play the significant role as a receiver on Seattle's starting offense, as I think that he is going to, then you don't want to risk him as a return guy. So I do think that he makes some sense if he is in fact brought to the Seahawks practice squad, as is being reported. And as you just mentioned, and the same thing here with Pooh Paul, linebacker that was originally at Arkansas, wound up at Ole Miss, terrific football player, a little bit undersized. It actually reminds me a little bit of Ernest Jones, to be honest with you, or Drake Thomas in that regard as well, in that he is an absolute yellow jacket on the field. I mean, he isn't the biggest, most imposing player, but he can be intimidating because he thumps and he plays highly aggressive football. I was stunned that the Los Angeles Rams released him, and so again, similar situation here. I want to kind of caution and not say too much before he's actually a member of the Seattle Seahawks practice squad, but it is being reported he is a spectacular player, and I think, and one that has the speed to not only be effective on defense, but also in terms of special teams. So if these signings are actually going to occur, then I think the Seahawks fans should be excited, because as we talked about, the Seahawks are one of those clubs that will continue to turn over the roster, turn over the practice squad, and I think that's a good thing. I think that is a statement about the fact that this is a club that is going for it, similar to the baseball team across the street in Seattle. They're going for it, and so Seahawks fans, Mariners fans, should be very excited.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Ring. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have the latest coming out of Seahawk land. Expect plenty more roster moves. We'll see what else is happening on that front. We'll have a couple of guest hosts jumping in for tomorrow's show. So make sure to listen in and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.